following extract is taken from the Sherlock Holmes novel A Study in Scarlet, first published in 1887. Here, Dr. Watson is introduced to Sherlock Holmes for the first time by a mutual friend. The detective then begins to describe the results of his latest scientific experiments. Here are some comprehension questions to consider. What type of building did they enter through the side door? What was the main feature of the chemical laboratory they entered? And what had the student discovered that excited him so much? I would also like you to consider the following for a discussion afterwards. How important are first impressions when meeting somebody new? As he spoke, we turned down a narrow lane and passed through a small side door which opened into a wing of the great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I needed no guiding as we ascended the bleak stone staircase and made our way down the long corridor with its vista of whitewashed wall and dun-coloured doors. Near the further end, a low-arched passage branched away from it and led to the chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in the room, who was bending over a distant table absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he glanced round and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I found it! I found it!" he shouted at my companion, running towards us with a test tube in his hand. "I have found a reagent which is precipitated by haemoglobin and nothing else." Had he discovered a gold mine? Greater delight could not have shone upon his features. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," said Stamford, introducing us. "How are you?" he said cordially, gripping my hand with a strength for which I had hardly given him credit. "Ah, you have been to Afghanistan, I perceive." "How on earth did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. "Never mind," he said, chuckling to himself. "The question is now about haemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine." It is interesting chemically, no doubt," I answered, "but practically—" "Why, man, it is the most practical medico-legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us now an infallible test for bloodstains? Come, over here now." He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. "Let us have some fresh blood," he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger and drawing off the resulting drop of blood into a chemical pipette. Now I add this small quantity of blood to a litre of water. You perceive the resulting mixture has the appearance of pure water. The proportion of blood cannot be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, that we shall be able to obtain the characteristic reaction." As he spoke, he threw into the vessel a few white crystals, then added some drops of a transparent fluid. In an instant the contents assumed a dull mahogany colour, and a brownish dust was precipitated to the bottom of the glass jar. "Ha ha!" he cried, clapping his hands and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. "What do you think of that?" "It seems a very delicate test," I remarked. "Beautiful, beautiful. The old guaiacum test was very clumsy and uncertain. So is the microscopic examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless if the stains are a few hours old. Now this appears to act well whether the blood is old or new. Had this test been invented, there are hundreds of men now walking the earth who would long ago have paid for the penalty of their crimes." "Indeed," I murmured. "Criminal cases are continually hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected of a crime months, perhaps, after it has been committed. His linen or clothes are examined and brownish stains are discovered upon them. Are they blood stains or mud stains or rust stains or fruit stains, or what are they? That is a question which has puzzled many an expert. And why? Because there was no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will no longer be any difficulty." His eyes fairly glittered as he spoke, and he put his hand over his heart and bowed as if to some applauding crowd conjured up by his imagination. "You are to be congratulated," I remarked, considerably surprised at the enthusiasm. "There was the case of von Bischoff at Frankfurt last year. He would certainly have been hung had this test been in existence. There was Mason of Bradford, and the notorious Muller, and Levert of Montpellier, and Sampson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which this would have been decisive." "You seem to be a walking calendar of crime," said Stamford with a laugh. "You might start a paper on those lines. Call it Police News of the Past." "Very interesting reading it might have made too," remarked Sherlock Holmes, sticking a small piece of plaster over the prick on his finger. "I have to be careful," he continued, turning to me with a smile, "for I dabble with poisons a good deal." He held out his hand as he spoke, and I noticed that it was mottled all over with similar pieces of plaster and discoloured with strong acids.